Time for the business then. We're going to start in Greece, of course, where the government has voted through what it claims are the last round of spending cuts it's going to have to make. Does it mean that the country's out of the woods, Will Edwards?
Unfortunately not. Despite the budget and big cuts being approved, we're still waiting for the EU to approve its €31 billion aid tranche to Greece. Now, that is rather time sensitive because at the end of this week, on Friday, Greece has to pay back €5 billion worth of government bonds. This could be a real issue for the country. It's not yet clear how it's going to do that. And the EU, meanwhile, is unlikely to approve this next tranche of aid today at a meeting of finance ministers in Brussels. That's according to Wolfgang Schäuble, the German finance minister. He says they're still waiting for a report on Greece by its creditors.
Now, even if Greece does manage it, is it really going to be the last round of cuts the Greek people are going to see?
Well, even if this payment from the EU does go through and these cuts are made, Greece does still need its debt restructuring at the end of the day. Whether it's going to be the Greek people paying more or creditors taking a bit of a hit remains to be seen. But there is only so much the Greek people can give. The cuts have been so deep that there's not very much left to cut, effectively. Also, the IMF even has been among those warning that if you make too many more cuts, it will affect growth even more, as many people say it has already, what with Greece getting ready to go into its 6th year of recession, it seems.
OK, let's go to Spain now. Debate currently raging there over the emotional subject of home evictions. Yeah,
that's right. Recently, there have been 2 suicides that have made headlines, both with people threatened with eviction. Obviously, a major issue in the country where, of course, a burst property bubble has been made worse by a 26% unemployment rate. Now, Spain's Prime Minister says his government will halt evictions related to mortgage non-payments. To talk about this, we're joined by our correspondent in Madrid, Sarah Morris. Thanks very much for being with us, Sarah. Firstly, why has this been a particularly big story in Spain, and what can the government do about it?
Well, for a long time, a lot of protesters have gone outside people's houses threatened by evictions, particularly the protesters Los Indignados and other people affected by the situation. So they've been very vocal at saying that these people should not have their houses repossessed, particularly since there are so many empty properties in Spain. The unusual aspect about the Spanish law is that even when people have their houses repossessed, the bank, if it sells the property at auction for a lot less than was lent, the bank has the right to continue to reclaim that debt from the person. And that is really what has led the people here to feel that there's such a miserable situation with a lifelong debt, even after the house is lost. The pressure has been such that socially people are demanding that the 2 mainstream political parties strike something which they very rarely do, which is a bipartisan agreement to change the current law.
Surely, though, Sarah, I mean, there has to be some kind of penalty for failing to pay your mortgage. I mean, there are conditions attached to it.
There will be conditions, I think, from this agreement. We still don't know the detail of the agreement, but the Conservatives and bankers have been very, very concerned that they don't simply say that people don't have to repay back their mortgages. And that does mean that we can expect serious conditions. We can probably expect thresholds of people's earnings and debts before they will actually become eligible for this law. And we can probably expect serious conditions attached, even perhaps the freezing of interest payments on the debt, but perhaps still some kind of obligation to repay the debt once people, for instance, find jobs again.
OK, Sarah Morris in Madrid, thank you very much.
OK, we can look at Japan now. They've released some disappointing GDP figures. This is just in the last few hours, isn't it, Will?
That's right, yeah. They've announced that the economy slowed down in the 3rd quarter by 0.9%. Now, if you annualise that over the whole year, that would add up to a 3.5% drop in the economy. So it's quite a big proportion there. There are a number of causes. Firstly, the boost from post-earthquake reconstruction, of course, after last year's earthquake and tsunami, that seems to be coming to an end now as the extra spending dries up there. Exporters also, of course, been hurt by a global slowdown more generally, and particularly in China, there have been those protests against Japan and Japanese goods over those disputed islands that both countries claim. And also, actually, just in the last few minutes, figures have come through from India showing that industrial output has dropped by 0.4%, an unexpected drop. So perhaps it's not just Japan being affected.
Presumably the market's down in Japan on the news?
Yes, absolutely. The Nikkei has taken somewhat of a hit, along with the Kospi, which is also in negative territory. But in China, the markets in Hong Kong and Shanghai are managing to stay in positive territory.
Now, while Starbucks, Amazon and Google coming under the spotlight today, this is in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah, well, executives from all three of those companies are going to be before a parliamentary hearing about corporate tax rates. Now, there have been a number of reports recently in the media about the very low rates paid by multinational companies in the United Kingdom. For example, Apple pays around 2% on its profits outside of the UK. Google paid even less than that, 1.5% in the UK on its turnover. And Starbucks has previously told the taxman it made a loss in the United Kingdom, while saying to investors, actually, we did rather well in the UK. It's only because they managed to channel their profits elsewhere that they're able to do this.
And how do companies get away with these incredibly low rates?
Well, it is particularly easy to do that if you do manage to go via an offshore institution. And of course, there are other countries with low corporate tax rates. Of course, it is worth noting that these countries do employ people and pay sales and payroll taxes.
Now, finally, Denmark seems to have decided that taxing people is not necessarily the best way to keep them healthy.
No, the country was one of the first in the world to introduce a fat tax, as it's been known. This was a tax on food containing more than 2.3% in saturated fat. It would add around 30 euro cents to a 250-gram pack of butter, for example, as you just saw there. However, the government's now scrapping it. They say it's inflated food prices artificially. It's endangering Danish jobs in food production, and also there are reports of people slipping over the border to Germany to pick up a few slices of bacon or maybe butter or whatever it is you fancy there.
Buy your butter in Germany instead. All right, well, thanks very much. Will Edwards there with the business news here on France 24. Coming up for you next, we've got some sad news for Mitt Romney. Since his defeat in the US election, he's lost over 66,000 friends on Facebook. A double whammy for the Republican in today's web news after the break.